So I want to say hello again to all of you who are in the room, and for all of you who are worshiping with us on all the platforms online. Thank you so much for being a community of faith together, right? And so we're in this series. I'm really excited about what it's doing in my heart, and I hope that God is speaking into yours as well. It's called, as you've just seen in the intro, Renovate. It is how the gospel makes us new again. And so this is the third message. And I want to begin this message with a question. It's kind of this foundational question that will sort of build out what this message is. And so it starts this way. Listen to the question and answer it for yourself. So why? Why are you hungry? Why are you thirsty? Now get past the fact that you didn't have breakfast this morning, right? All right? And then move, why? And you know the first answer to that is, why are you hungry, why are you thirsty? The first answer to that is because I get hungry and I get thirsty. You see, it's that fundamental. It is that foundational. It is purely because I get hungry and thirsty. But there's even a deeper level, right? It's because, your answer is because my body, it was designed to run on the fuel of carbs and proteins and vitamins and, most importantly, caffeine, right? And so if I don't eat, if I get hungry and that hunger gets serious, then hunger becomes anger, right? And you know that condition, that's called hangry, right? That's our children, our daughters used to get into that condition, and so I could see that. But you get that I'm really asking something deeper. You get that I'm asking, why are you as a person, as a soul, why are you hungry? Why are you thirsty? There's an answer to that. And the answer is that God designed you for desire. He designed you to desire satisfaction. He designed you to want happiness. He designed you to crave satisfaction. He made that into you. In fact, to know that answer really sort of designs for you how you live your life. In fact, 50 years ago, the British theologian C.S. Lewis, he said about this thing that a car is made to run on petrol. There's your proof that he's British, right? Because he doesn't know it's gasoline. And so a car's made to run on petrol, on gasoline, and it would not properly run on anything else. Now, God designed the human to run on Himself, God Himself. He Himself is the fuel our spirits are designed to burn, or the food our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. God cannot give us a happiness and a peace apart from Himself, because it is not there. There is no such thing. That's 50 years ago. 800 years ago, the theologian Thomas Aquinas, he said that no one can live without delight. That is why a man deprived of spiritual joy gives himself over to carnal pleasures. So, 1700 years ago, it's Augustine of Hippo, the theologian, the great early church father, speaking to God. He says essentially the same thing in an even more succinct way. He wrote to God, you have made us for yourself. And our heart is restless until it rests in you. Now here's the question. How do we know that that's true? How do we know that that's true? Here's how we know. Because Jesus Himself said it first of all. And I want you to hear that, and that's what this message is going to be about. It's going to be about how the gospel satisfies us. And so, in order for you to really embrace what Jesus has to say to us, you're going to have to really know the context in which He said it. And so it's John 6. And so in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, I've got to just sort of set the scene for you. And so here is Jesus ministering around the the Sea of Galilee. He's up in Galilee, and he's over on the Tiberias side. And there a crush of humanity is gathered all around him, a crowd larger than 5,000. They are there to hear him teach. They're there also to hope that he will heal some of them of their sicknesses, and some are just there to witness it all, just to see the spectacle of it. And so he is there and he teaches them, and day comes into late afternoon. And so their experience with food is not exactly like your and my experience with food. So food was so scarce that actually you were eating food today just to have the strength to be physically able to do what you needed to do later. And they get to the end of the day and there is no food. And Jesus begins to feel great compassion for them. And so he gathers these 5 barley loaves. In his day, a barley loaf would have been kind of an overgrown biscuit or roll. And so he gathers these 5 little barley loaves and 2 dried fish, and he just prays over them. And then he begins to break it off and give it to his 12 disciples to then go and distribute it among this crowd of more than 5,000. And soon it becomes apparent that something miraculous is going on, because each of the passages that tell us about this tell us that the people took their portion and they ate it until they were full. They ate until they were filled. And then it became abundantly abundantly clear that a miracle had happened when they began gathering these baskets and baskets and baskets of leftovers. And so this adoring, learning crowd suddenly sort of turns into a mob action, because they decided, hey, wait, he would be a great political leader. I mean, bread every day. And so chaos begins to break out, and Jesus masterfully breaks it up. And so he takes his disciples and puts them in a boat and sends them across the way. And then he disperses the crowd, and then he goes in a third direction himself up into a mountain to pray, to be completely alone. And it sort of just calms things. Later in the night, he crosses over miraculously. On that lake. He travels up to 8 miles maybe. It could have been as much as 8 miles going across that lake, and even stills a storm that the disciples are in. And so it's these miraculous 12 hours. And so the sun is coming up on the other side, the Capernaum side of the Sea of Galilee. And so there he is with his disciples, and the sun is rising, and suddenly, as the gray is turning to light, they see all of these heads, they see all of these bodies, they see all of these people, the crowd that was over on the other side. Overnight, they've made their way over to him, and there they are standing saying, okay, we're ready for bread again. And so Jesus responds to that. And so in John 6, it begins in verse 26, Jesus responds about their franticness to come around to the other side of the lake to see him. And so he responds to them and says in verse 26, truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me, you're churning to find me, not because you saw the sign, the attesting miracle that he is God in flesh, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. Do not work for the food which perishes, but work for the food which endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man, meaning him, will give you. For on him the Father has set his seal. He has made it clear. He has officially shown you that he is God in flesh, come to be your Messiah. Verse 28, therefore he said to them, so he says for them to work for that food. 28, they say back to him, verse 28, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? They're caught in this works religion, ancient Judaism, 625 rules to keep in order to, get God's approval. So what are the works that we must do in order to work the works of God? What do we got to do to get the blessing of bread every day? There's the question. And Jesus answered and said to them, here's the work of God. Believe in him whom he has sent. That's the work. Believe in the Messiah. Believe in me. So they said to him, what then do you do for a sign so that we may see and believe you? What work will you perform? Verse 31 is a hint. Our fathers ate manna in the wilderness. As it is written, he gave them bread out of heaven to eat. And so what sign would you like to perform this morning? And Jesus answered to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who has given the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down out of heaven that gives life to the world. He means himself. And they said to him, Lord, always give us this bread. They're still hanging on for bless me. You know, give me the BMW. The preacher on TV said if I would give this ministry, God will give me a BMW. Where is that? Where's that? And Jesus answers, it's all here. Verse 35, it's all now, right here. He said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger. He who believes in me will never thirst. And it turns out that what Jesus said is the gospel. He has just given us the gospel here. And out of it is this big idea. And the big idea that he's seeking to communicate in his generation and now to you and me is this, that who Jesus is and what he can do in our lives fully satisfies our desires for joy, for happiness, for fullness. And that's what he's seeking to show us. This passage and this message is about how the gospel fulfills. It is about how the gospel satisfies us. And so how does it do that? Jesus is ready to answer. It's what he was doing in this passage. It's what he's doing with these people. He's saying, look, the gospel will satisfy you when you do this. Number one, when you will first stop churning for stale bread. It's a big deal. If your heart is turned to want for the gospel to be the satisfaction of your life, then what Jesus says to you first is, okay, here's your first step. Stop churning for stale bread. That's what's happening in verses 26 and 27. And so when you look at them, you see that the core of what Jesus is saying here is, look, you seek me because you want me to keep providing bread that will grow stale, that will spoil. And so you want to be filled by that material, physical bread. You're looking for the satisfaction of your stomach. You just want the here and now appetites filled, which will be empty tomorrow. And so Jesus says, stop working, stop churning for bread that only grows stale, that will never fully satisfy your hunger. And he's making the point of the whole New Testament. The Bible tells us over and over that our sinful nature spoils our desires. That's a big reality. What is wrong with us spoils our desires. The Bible says what is wrong with us is our sin, our sinful nature, our brokenness, this propensity to turn away from God and not look to Him. And so therefore behaviors follow that, and those behaviors are called sins. And so it is what is that thing that is wrong with us, our sinful nature, it spoils, it disorders our desires. And so every one of us is capable of really very self-centered, short-sighted, self-destructive desires. And so we just simply want to feed on stale, molded bread simply because we're hungry in the moment. And so when our sinful self infiltrates desires, they become disordered, broken. In other words, desire goes bad. If you want to know what's wrong with desires in you, it is because good desires have gone bad. Like selfish pleasure or desire maybe to show yourself superior no matter who it hurts, or a desire to control someone, or a desire for revenge. All of those are disordered and broken desires. But but they come from this place that God has created. And so what's the point that we have made? That God made you, He designed you to thirst. He designed you to be hungry, not just physically, but spiritually. He has designed you to desire satisfaction. And so you find that in the desires that God has built into you. A desire for, all of your desires can be found in this. A desire for intimacy, a desire for security, a desire for significance, a desire for meaning and for purpose. But those good desires get broken by our own sinful nature. And so your ambition that has hurt others, that ambition was once a desire for significance, now broken. Your lust or repeated, the sort of repeated or kind of or addictive exposure to pornography. It's a disordered desire for intimacy, now broken. Maybe your involvement in the affair. It's a disordered desire to simply be loved, now broken. Your involvement maybe with drugs or alcohol, or just a disordered desire for comfort or for security, now broken. Your workaholism could be disordered desire for acceptance, now broken. And so because we're fallen, because our sinful nature leads us to misuse desire, it lies to us, and we know it's a lie, but we obey it because there's at least a moment of pleasure in it. There's a morsel in it, even though the cost of the moment is never worth it. And Jesus is just telling us that desire for anything less than Him will turn out to be stale bread. It'll fill you for less than a moment, and then your stomach will hurt, and you'll feel worse than empty. And so the first thing that Jesus is telling us and how the gospel fulfills is a really simple thing. He's just saying, look, would you just stop churning for stale bread? But He says another thing. He takes us another step. There's a progression here. He says, but rather start doing this. Just start. This is going to sound so simple. He tells this crowd, and He's speaking to your heart and mind, this, look, just start seeing me as bread that fully satisfies. Just start seeing me that way. There's a degree to which I don't think I have broken through with this thought yet. So a lot of you have kind of grown up without any exposure at all to Jesus, and so He's just kind of a distant religious figure, and so that statement I've just given you doesn't make a lot of sense. Just see Him as bread that satisfies. For some of you, you've grown up in just sort of like ritualistic religion, and it's just sort of mechanical, do 3 of these, go like this, go do, and therefore, God won't be mad at you. And this just doesn't make sense maybe to you initially to say, just see Jesus. Some of you even grew up in a home where in the 4th grade, your mom said to you, you don't want to go to hell, so you need to pray this prayer. And so you prayed that prayer, and that was it. And that's all your mom wanted you to do, and that's all that it was in your home. And this doesn't make a lot of sense to you. And so I'm really just asking you to draw in here for just a moment. Jesus is saying, look, all of this manna talk and all of this bread that I have broken to you, you tend to look for the blessing of that rather than looking to me as the source of bread. And so they're asking Him for this sign. So what sign? What sign will you give us? This is after 12 hours of miracle after miracle after miracle. They say, what sign will you show us? What miraculous sign will you show it? And I'm asking, what sign do they need? He's just fed 5,000 with a few loaves of bread. He's healed their sick and demon-possessed. He's just walked on water and stopped the storm in its tracks. And so what do they need? Jesus tells them, look, I'm not giving you the sign that you're asking for, because manna is imitation. You want magic bread falling from the sky that's sweet. It's going to rot by the end of the day. I'm not giving you that. I want to give you true bread. I want to give you the thing that will nourish your life fully. And it's me. It's me. See Him as the bread that fully satisfies. Not until you can see me as true bread will you ever begin to experience the fullness, satisfaction that I've designed you to be hungry for. The bread is the sign, Jesus is saying, I'm the reality. And so you have all the evidence you need. Listen to this. You have all the evidence you need simply by looking at me. If you'll seriously do that, you're going to find me irresistible. I saw that in just the last week or so. I saw a printed interview with the actor Andrew Garfield. He's one of the characters in the contemporary movie called Silence. It's about faith. It's not a faith story, but it's about faith. And so his character is a Jesuit priest from the 17th century. And so to prepare for that role, he had to go immerse himself in what a Jesuit would immerse himself in. And so in the interview, he said that the most surprising thing, because he's not a Christian, he doesn't follow God, and he said the most surprising thing in preparing for the role was that he couldn't stop. He couldn't help it. He couldn't help falling in love with Jesus. Because why? Why? Because he just looked at Him. He seriously saw Him. All you have to do is seriously look at Him. And He's all the evidence that you need that God is real, that He's infinitely good, that His grace can overwhelm you, and that He's the answer for fulfillment. And so you've got to see that He's the source. Jesus is the source for joy, for peace, for rest, for fullness, to come into a life no matter the circumstances. Whether the economy is good or bad, He can be a source of joy. No matter whether the economy has been bad for the third year in a row, He can still be joy for you. Whether you have a job or you don't, He can be bread to you. Whether you are sick or well, He can be bread to you. Look at how Jesus describes. I want you to think about how Jesus describes the outcomes of following Him. When Jesus says in John 11 to come after me, I will give you rest. He means soul rest. He wants to fill desire. If you will follow me, I can fill what you were designed to be hungry for. In John 10, it's verse 10, He said, I came that they might have life. And that word is loaded. It means life like He Himself experiences. Think of the perfection of Jesus' life, the perfection of His joy and His fulfillment that He had in His Father who created Him. And He's saying, I've come so that you can begin to taste that life. Look at the outcome of Him being the source. In John 15, He does the same. He says, look, everything I've told you, the whole reason for my coming is so that my joy might be in you and that your joy might become full. He has designed you to be hungry and thirsty, and He has come to you to fill that hunger and thirst. And so the second thing Jesus says about your hunger and thirst, look, just see Him as true, fulfilling, lasting bread. And then He says the third thing, and all of these are almost like half steps, aren't they? He's just saying the simplest things. First, stop churning for stale bread. Second, just see me for bread that satisfies. Third, make me bread of your life. Make me the bread of your life. That's what's happening in verses 34 and 35. And so the people around Him, Lord, always give us this bread. They're still asking for the magic bread that falls out of heaven that tastes sweet and that's rotten by the end of the day. They're still asking for that. And Jesus just says it bluntly. He goes sort of eyeball to eyeball with them and with your heart and mind. And in verse 35, he just says, look, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger. He who believes in me will never thirst. I'm the total source of every hunger and thirst in your life. Jesus is giving you a reason to come to Him so that you can be fulfilled and satisfied and happy. He made you for that hunger and thirst, and He fills it. And so here's what my problem will always and ever be without Jesus. My problem is not that I will have desires to be fulfilled. My problem is that I am willing to settle for this, something that somebody's written, that I'm willing to settle for the two-bit, low-yield, short-term, never satisfying, person-destroying, God-belittling pleasures of this world. And I'm saying, don't settle for that. Don't settle for less than true bread that never spoils, that satisfies forever. And so Jesus says, let me be this by saying two things in verse 35. The first thing He says is, come to me and you'll never be hungry. Come to me and you'll never be hungry. It means this: if you've never embraced Christ, if you've never accepted the message of the gospel that what He did on the cross can be true for you and all of its endless implications and the life that it can give you, if you've never done that, He's saying, come to me and embrace that. He's saying to everyone who names the name of Christ but has moved on from the gospel, because, okay, if you can't recognize sarcasm, here comes because the gospel, those are just the introductory concepts you need to know to come to faith, and then you put it away and you move on to something else. Well, because you have put it away and moved on to something else, it describes why you are so dissatisfied. This is about coming to Him every day to be bread. How do you live in the gospel? You come to Him every day and say, God, not my work for my significance. You be bread. Not the acceptance of that crowd or those people or whatever, the people I don't even like. They're becoming, sort of this. Not that. You be bread. Not money as a source of security and joy, but you be bread. And every other thing you look to be the source of life. Not that, but Jesus, you be bread to me. And then He uses a second phrase, not just come to me and you'll never hunger, but believe in me and you'll never thirst. And so the connotation of belief, right, in our generation is kind of mental assent. Oh, I understand these facts, and yeah, okay, that could be true. That's what we think that belief is. But in the Bible, the word has this incredible implication. The word means to become completely dependent upon. It is as if I fall backwards, that moment that I lose control of myself, and therefore I am depending on something to catch me. That's belief. And that is what He means by belief. And so it means for you, I've never experienced the gospel, but I'll take the risk of believing that it's true, of believing that it can be all that Jesus says it can be. For those of you who name the name of Christ, this is about believing again and again and again. It is about waking up today and say, I am facing so much pressure at work, so much craziness and chaos in my relationship. I've got these disordered and broken desires that I hate. This is about turning to Him every single day to say, I believe that you can be bread for me. So we're accustomed to saying when we come to Jesus that it's all about the cost, right? Right? And if you actually are preaching the Bible accurately, that'll be a major deal. Coming to Jesus is all about the cost, right? Give up and walk away. and all of those things. And you know what? There's a level at which that is completely true. But you know, when Jesus says that, it is always for this incredible reason. I mean, think of the kingdom parables. It's Matthew 13 especially. Just the stories that Jesus tells about what it means to come to Him. He says, look, the kingdom of God is like this. A man finds a treasure in a field, and he goes and he sells. He has to sell everything that he owns. He has to give it all up. It's all, except that's not really the way Jesus says it. Jesus says, for the joy, for the sheer joy of finding the treasure, he sells everything, because everything he has and everything he possesses and everything he owns doesn't even come close to the value of the treasure. And that treasure is that Jesus can be bread to you. And so, the deepest happiness possible is not found from God. Give us magic bread that falls from heaven. The deepest happiness that you can experience is not from God. The deepest happiness is in Him. Live in Him. Live in the gospel. Let's bow together.